Start your good breakfast with Kellogg's Sugar Frosted Flakes cereal.
Water wiggle!
Remember the funniest things from the 70s? The ones we all loved but somehow aren't allowed anymore? These things filled our homes, schools, and screens with laughs, danger, and a kind of freedom that felt totally normal back then. When did what made us laugh start getting locked away? Candy cigarettes. You ever hold a piece of chalky sugar between your fingers and pretend to blow out smoke like a Hollywood star? That was childhood in the 1970s. Candy cigarettes were the ultimate playground status symbol. You'd walk around with a red-tipped sugar stick hanging from your lips, squinting like Clint Eastwood, thinking you looked 10 times cooler than you were. Parents bought them right alongside bubble gum and jawbreakers. Back then, it was all about the fun, not the future. What was a little pretend puff compared to a real Marlboro? Except it wasn't just pretend. Studies later showed kids who played with them were more likely to smoke for real later. Eventually, health experts and angry moms caught on. Companies either pulled them from shelves or gave them harmless rebrands like candy sticks. But let's be real, nobody was fooled. That little red dye at the end still screamed future smoker. Jarts, lawn darts. If you never hurled a heavy metal dart across the yard and narrowly missed your cousin's head, did you even grow up in the 1970s? Jarts were sold as outdoor family fun, just a good old-fashioned game of aim and toss, like horseshoes but with actual spears. These things were massive, made of thick plastic with metal tips that could pierce the ground and occasionally people. Yet they came in bright colors and family-friendly boxes like a wholesome backyard treat. Nobody thought twice about handing kids a pointed missile and saying, "Go play." It felt like summer. Toss a dart, grill a hot dog, try not to bleed. By the late 1980s, emergency rooms started seeing more injuries, then deaths. The government banned jarts for sale.
In a nationwide survey, doctors in all branches of medicine were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" The brand named most was Camel's.
Doctors endorsing cigarettes. You know what really sells a pack of smokes? A man in a white coat saying it's good for your health. In the 1970s, television was full of cigarette ads where real doctors told you which brand was smoother on the throat. These weren't actors. These were actual licensed professionals endorsing tobacco. Some of the most iconic ads had doctors saying they smoked Camels while making house calls. You'd watch this while Dad puffed away in his recliner. The trust was automatic. If your doctor smoked, how bad could it be? But as lung cancer numbers climbed, the facade cracked. By the end of the 1970s, public outrage forced networks to pull cigarette commercials completely. Smoking on airplanes. Ever tried to breathe in a flying ashtray at 30,000 feet? That was airline travel in the 1970s. Planes had ashtrays in every armrest. The smoking section was a joke because the entire plane reeked. Light up in row 12 and the guy in row 30 would still get a lungful. Flight attendants even offered free cigarettes during some flights. They called it service. Nobody seemed to care about babies on board or people with asthma. By the mid-1980s, airlines began sectioning off smoking zones. Eventually, full bans rolled in. Game show host Kisses Nothing says family entertainment like a full-grown host kissing strangers on national television. In the 1970s, game shows were filled with winks, nudges, and smooches, usually from the host to whatever contestant happened to be female. Richard Dawson on Family Feud kissed every woman who stepped up to the podium, married, single, old, young, didn't matter. Studio audiences cheered, contestants blushed. Nobody called it weird. It was seen as charming, maybe even classy. Eventually, people started speaking up. Networks got cautious. The idea of a host kissing random people now would spark outrage, not applause. Kids in pickup truck beds. Before car seats, before safety laws, before anyone thought about windburn or flying gravel, there was the back of the pickup truck. This was every kid's favorite spot in the 1970s. No seat belts, no helmets, just a steel bed and the open road. You'd pile in with your cousins, sit on a tire or toolbox, and hang on for dear life. You could wave at cars behind you, shout into the wind, or lie down and watch clouds zoom by. It felt like freedom, but accidents happened. Kids flew out during sudden turns or stops. By the 1990s, most states banned kids from riding in truck beds.
Miracle Clackers are for everyone, even the little guys. Do it with both hands for stereo clackers.
Clackers. Two hard plastic balls on a string. What could go wrong? In the 1970s, clackers were the height of schoolyard cool. You held the little ring, swung the balls up and down until they clacked together above and below your hand. Everyone had a pair until they exploded, literally. Clackers were made from acrylic so brittle it shattered under stress. If you got good at them, the friction would heat the plastic, and eventually, bang, a ball would snap and send sharp plastic flying like shrapnel. Kids ended up with bruises, cuts, and glassy bits in their eyes. Parents freaked out, teachers banned them. Eventually, so did the government. Cigarette and beer vending machines. Imagine walking into a bowling alley, slipping in some change, and out pops a pack of smokes or a cold beer. That was life in the 1970s. Vending machines for cigarettes and alcohol were everywhere. No ID check, no age limit, just coins and convenience. Kids could and did buy packs of cigarettes right next to a Snickers bar. Bars had them. Gas stations had them. Even some workplaces had them in break rooms. You needed a smoke on your lunch break? Hit the vending machine. No manager required. Teenage babysitters gone wild. Back in the 1970s, a babysitter's starter pack looked different. You had a bottle of soda, a six-pack of beer in the fridge, and a cigarette in one hand, and this was for the sitter, not the parents. Teenagers were regularly left in charge of kids with zero supervision and full access to whatever was in the kitchen or liquor cabinet. You could find 15-year-olds lighting up after putting toddlers to bed. Some even invited friends over for impromptu hangouts. Parents trusted young teens without background checks, cell phones or emergency numbers, station wagon death seats. You haven't lived until you've ridden in the back of a station wagon facing traffic. That was the dream seat in the 1970s, the backward-facing bench with no seat belts, just a metal handle to grab when the car turned too fast. It was like being on a slow-moving carnival ride. You waved at drivers, made faces at strangers, watched headlights come at you like a chase scene. Parents loved it because you were out of sight and, more importantly, out of the way. Nobody worried about crash safety or whiplash. Safety regulations weren't what they are today. Back then, fun mattered more than physics.
Don't be scared. I'm the super sweet monster with the super sweet new cereal, Count Chocula.
Cartoon cereal commercials. Saturday morning was sacred. You woke up, turned on the television, and there they were. Bright, loud, animated mascots peddling mountains of sugar. Tony the Tiger told you it was great. Toucan Sam begged you to follow your nose. These weren't just cartoon animals, they were advertisers in disguise. The 1970s saw the golden age of kids' programming and an explosion of cereal commercials during those very hours. School paddling. In the 1970s, classrooms came with rulers, chalkboards, and something else. Paddles, big flat wooden paddles, often with holes drilled in for aerodynamics, hung behind teacher desks like warning signs. If you acted out, bend over and brace yourself. Corporal punishment wasn't a threat, it was standard policy. Some schools even had paddling ceremonies where misbehaving kids were punished in front of classmates. Principals took pride in how hard they could swing. Parents supported it. Spare the rod, spoil the child wasn't just a saying, it was Parenting 101. Eventually, medical professionals and child psychologists spoke up. By the late 1980s, most states had banned corporal punishment in public schools. Drunk comedy, characters. If you were drunk and slurring in the 1970s, chances are you had a hit sitcom deal. Comedy shows back then loved their lovable, lush characters. It was always the same gag. The guy who had one too many leaned on the mic stand and forgot his lines. The crowd roared, America chuckled, and poured another drink. Alcoholism wasn't treated like a disease. It was a punchline. Even kids watching with their families saw it as normal. Uncle Bob acts funny after dinner, just like the guy on TV. But as public awareness grew around alcohol abuse, the tide turned. The drunk gag faded out. Today, shows still depict alcohol, but not like that. Inflatable furniture. In the 1970s, your living room might have looked more like a bouncy castle. Blow-up furniture was all the rage. Inflatable chairs, sofas, even ottomans. They came in bright neon colors, made of shiny PVC plastic. You bought them at department stores and blew them up by mouth or with a little pump. They were light, cheap, and supposedly cool. Problem was, the stuff was barely furniture. Sit on it too fast and it would burst. Leave it in the sun, and it melted into a chemical-smelling blob. Worse than any of that, PVC off-gassing wasn't exactly health. By the 1980s, health concerns and sheer practicality killed the trend. Realistic toy guns. The 1970s were the Wild West of toy advertising, and nothing captured that better than kids on TV blasting away with ultra-realistic plastic rifles. These weren't Nerf guns or neon-colored water pistols. These were replicas down to the wood grain and clicking chamber sounds. Some even had fake shells that ejected. Kids dressed in camo, aiming down sights, running across fields like little soldiers. Parents watched the commercials and smiled. Boys will be boys. Nobody thought about real consequences until stories began circulating about police mistaking toy guns for real ones. By the 1990s, new rules required toy guns to have bright orange tips, the R word. There was a time when that word was everywhere. In sitcoms, in stand-up, in classrooms, it was tossed around as an insult, a joke, or just lazy slang. In the 1970s, that word was still printed in medical documents and used in school testing, but mostly it had become a punchline. Characters on TV said it without consequence. Teachers said it during lessons. Kids repeated it without knowing what it really meant. But for the people it described, people with intellectual disabilities, it was never just a word. It was a label, a put-down, a barrier. Advocates began speaking up. By the 2000s, the term was largely scrubbed from legal and medical use. Times Square peep shows. There was a time when Times Square was not for families. It was not for Disney. In the 1970s, Times Square was a neon-lit jungle of vice. Theaters, strip clubs, and most famously, peep shows. You paid a few coins, stepped into a small booth, and watched. It was dark, loud, seedy, and completely normal. Times Square was advertised as gritty, raw, real New York. Tourists came to see it. Locals just accepted it. But underneath the lights, there was danger. Crime surged. Exploitation ran rampant. Eventually, the city stepped in with major redevelopment efforts in the 1990s. Airline stewardess requirements. Flying in the 1970s was considered glamorous, but that glamour came with a price usually worn by the women serving your drinks. Airline stewardesses were hired less for their skills and more for their looks. There were height requirements, weight checks, makeup inspections, and those uniforms, miniskirts, go-go boots, tight blouses. Entire advertising campaigns centered around how attractive your stewardess might be. Airlines sold sex as part of the service. These women were often required to be single and could be fired if they got married or pregnant. By the end of the 1970s, lawsuits began to pile up. Slowly the rules faded, uniforms changed, job titles changed. Blackface on television. It's hard to imagine now, but in the 1970s you could still turn on television and see blackface on comedy shows, on variety specials, in front of live audiences. White performers would darken their skin, exaggerate their features, and perform racist caricatures, and the audience laughed. Sometimes they gave standing ovations. The impact was real. These skits reinforced stereotypes, normalized mockery, and dehumanized entire communities. But activists and artists were watching and speaking out. Slowly, the shame caught up. The skits stopped airing. The reruns vanished. Today, blackface is universally condemned, a career ender, a cultural scar.
Smart woman, she's putting a new floor down by herself. Wise woman, she's using Ken Tile vinyl asbestos tile.
Asbestos everywhere. You probably never saw it. That's the scary part. Asbestos was everywhere in the 1970s, tucked into ceiling tiles, sprayed onto school walls, mixed into fluffy pink insulation. It was marketed as a miracle material, fireproof, durable, cheap. What no one talked about was that breathing it in could kill you slowly, decades later.
It's a very difficult diagnosis. Doctors generally don't see this in their lifetimes. And I went through a lengthy process of diagnosis to figure out what was happening.
Kids sat through math class while microscopic asbestos fibers floated in the air. Janitors swept floors lined with toxic dust. In the 1970s, asbestos was still legal and widely used. Eventually, lawsuits brought the truth out. Today, schools undergo asbestos abatement. Homeowners pay thousands to remove it, but back then it was just another layer in the walls. Invisible poison you breathed in daily. Lid paint. In the 1970s, kids put everything in their mouths. Blocks, toys, railings, and that was a real problem, because so much of it was painted with lead. Lead-based paint was bright, cheap, and easy to apply. It made colors pop and shine. Nobody questioned what was inside it. Swing sets were painted with it, wooden toy trains, even lunchboxes. And yes, toddlers chewed on them. Lead doesn't just stay on surfaces. It chips, flakes, and rubs off into mouths, bloodstreams, developing brains. Kids started showing signs of lead poisoning, developmental delays, behavior problems, lifelong cognitive damage, diet speed pills. In the 1970s, if you wanted to lose weight fast, there was a pill for that. Diet products were everywhere, marketed to housewives, working women, even teenagers. These pills promised energy, appetite control, and rapid results. What they didn't advertise was what was inside. Amphetamines, basically legal speed. You'd pop a pill in the morning and feel unstoppable. No hunger, no fatigue, maybe a little jittery, but hey, that just meant it was working. Doctors even prescribed them. Side effects included nervousness, mood swings, insomnia, sometimes worse. By the late 1970s, the truth caught up.
Center filled with all the latest scratch and sniff ideas. There's a display in every Circle K store covered with mellow smellow fun products.
Scratch and sniff stickers. Scratch and sniff stickers made notebooks smell like fruit salad or something pretending to be grape, banana, pizza, popcorn. These tiny scented rewards were currency on the playground. You earned them from teachers, traded them with friends, collected them in sticker books. Some smelled better than others. Some were so strong they made your eyes water. Others lost their smell after a few scratches but were kept anyway, honored like faded trophies. Chicano rock. It sounded like mariachi horns over a guitar solo. It felt like a backyard cookout mixed with a garage concert. Chicano rock wasn't just music, it was resistance, pride, celebration, born from Mexican-American communities. This genre gave voice to generations caught between cultures. Bands like El Chicano and Tierra turned that tightrope walk into an anthem. Melodies that carried history in every chord. High karate aftershave. High karate aftershave was a joke and a phenomenon all at once. It came in a cheap bottle with commercials that turned masculinity into parody. Spray this on and women would attack you. Literally, the ads were absurd, over the top, and completely unforgettable. But behind the humor was a surprisingly decent scent. High karate became the go-to for teenage boys trying to smell grown-up and grown men trying to stay playful. It was the cologne you found in your dad's drawer next to tie clips and old movie stubs. Today, it's a punchline for some. and a scent memory for others. Mixtapes. Mixtapes were handwritten love letters wrapped in cassette cases. You waited by the radio for hours just to hit record at the perfect moment, trying to catch your favorite song without the DJ talking over it. You rewound, replayed, and carefully curated the perfect order. Some were made for crushes, others for best friends. Each one had a theme, a purpose, and a heart behind it. You picked songs that said what you couldn't, then labeled the tape in your best handwriting. Show and tell projector. Show and tell felt like technology from another planet. A boxy contraption with the soul of a film projector and the heart of a storybook. It let you watch a movie while listening to a record all in your living room. You didn't need a teacher or classroom, just one of those magical cartridges and the willingness to sit still. It would whir to life, with a soft hum, the narrator's voice crackling through speakers. As images scrolled across the tiny screen, it felt like the future.
TWA to California. 5 non-stops every business day to Los Angeles.
TWA Airlines. There was a time when TWA meant elegance. Stepping onto a Trans-World Airlines flight was like entering a luxury hotel in the sky. The seats were wide, the service crisp, the logo iconic. But by the 1970s, deregulation hit hard. New competitors offered faster routes and cheaper fares. TWA expanded too quickly, bought too many jets, couldn't keep up with ruthless economics. Bankruptcy became a familiar word. By the time American Airlines absorbed what remained in the early 2000s, the brand was already a shadow. Stirrup pants. Stirrup pants were the 1980s attempt to combine fashion with function. They did neither particularly well. These leggings had a strap that looped under your foot, supposedly to keep them from riding up. In reality, they pulled awkwardly at your ankles and made your feet sweat. But we wore them anyway. They came in bright colors, bold patterns, every synthetic material known to mankind. They were paired with oversized sweaters that made no logical sense. Minimal wave music. Minimal wave buzzed, pulsed, barely made sense. It wasn't made for sing-alongs or car radios. It was made for empty rooms lit by fluorescent lights and lonely kids who wanted to feel like machines. This was the birth of synth music, and it didn't ask for your approval. While disco dominated airwaves and arena rock-filled stadiums, minimal wave snuck in through the basement, quiet, awkward, strangely magnetic. Schiaparelli perfumes. Schiaparelli perfumes once lived in the same league as Chanel and Dior. With surrealist bottles and bold floral compositions, they brought high fashion to everyday American women's dressing tables. But in the 1970s, America was shifting. Fashion was getting younger, louder, more synthetic. The brand struggled to adapt. Department stores gave shelf space to trendier names. The old-world elegance of Schiaparelli felt out of step in a decade of disco and denim. Leg warmers. Leg warmers were a fashion miracle, pointless and perfect all at once. Originally designed for dancers to keep muscles warm, they jumped out of studios into the mainstream thanks to aerobics videos and pop culture icons. Suddenly, everyone was wearing them over tights, over jeans, even over bare legs. Streaking. It was the kind of madness only the 1970s could have invented. Strip down, sprint across a public space, and somehow make it feel like a movement. Streaking wasn't just a prank. It was a cultural phenomenon. College campuses, football fields, live television broadcasts. You'd be mid-sentence and boom, someone zipped by in nothing but sneakers and bravery.
Hold it. Oh, Mom, get a Vivitar.
This is a Vivitar.
Vivitar cameras. In the 1970s, Vivitar cameras were everywhere. They weren't the fanciest, but they worked. They captured birthday parties, backyard barbecues, road trips to Mount Rushmore. They were affordable, sturdy, and proudly American. For amateur photographers, Vivitar was a ticket to creativity. Cabbage Patch, Kid Frenzy, Cabbage Patch. Kid frenzy turned toy stores into battlegrounds. These soft-bodied dolls with unique, slightly odd faces were the must-have gift of the 1980s. Each came with birth certificates and adoption papers, making it feel like you were bringing home a real baby. Getting your hands on one was another story. Parents lined up at dawn, some camped overnight, others sprinted through department stores in scenes more suited to action movies. The smiley face. That little yellow smile was everywhere, on buttons, bumper stickers, T-shirts, notebooks. It told you to have a nice day like it actually meant it. In the weird, wonderful chaos of the 1970s, people needed that message more than ever. The smiley face wasn't just a graphic, it was a lifeline. Clark Equipment Company. Clark Equipment Company once helped build America. Its construction vehicles, forklifts, and loaders were staples on job sites from highways to factories. The brand stood for toughness and reliability, but the 1970s brought headwinds. Inflation climbed, industrial jobs declined, foreign competitors offered cheaper alternatives. Clark, heavy with overhead and tradition, struggled to pivot. Innovation slowed, market share shrank.
Brand new Boombox right in your home. Order now at Radio Shack.
Boombox battles. Boombox battles turned sidewalks into stages and backpacks into speaker cabinets. In the 1980s, carrying a massive boombox on your shoulder was more than a way to listen to music. It was a declaration. You had style, taste, and batteries heavy enough to power a small city block. These machines blasted everything from hip-hop to hair metal, and they didn't ask for permission. You walked down the street with your soundtrack trailing behind you, volume all the way up. Some kids parked them at basketball courts. Others lined them up outside corner stores. Whoever had the best bass usually won the crowd. Burger Chef. Burger Chef once had more locations than McDonald's. That's the part people forget. Before Golden Arches took over every highway exit, Burger Chef was America's fast food sweetheart. Its secret was the Fun Meal, a direct precursor to the Happy Meal, giving kids toys and games years before anyone else. The burgers were solid, prices were right, families loved it. But then came lawsuits, missteps, the slow bleed of bad business decisions. Hardee's bought them out, closed locations, erased the name almost overnight. Some buildings stayed standing for years, sun-faded signs above cracked pavement. The van. They weren't just vehicles, they were dreams on wheels, decked out in shag carpet and questionable murals of wizards and wolves. Van exploitation films took the freedom of the open road and turned it into cinematic chaos. The plot usually didn't matter. A guy, a girl, a van, and a summer full of terrible decisions. Oldsmobile was the brand your grandfather trusted. It was dependable, steady, proudly American. In the 1970s, it was one of General Motors' most successful lines. The Cutlass was everywhere. Parking lots, driveways, high school graduation gifts. It was a badge of middle-class confidence. But times changed. Japanese automakers brought efficiency, the luxury market moved to BMW and Mercedes-Benz. Oldsmobile struggled to define itself. Slap bracelets. Slap bracelets were the toy that hit your wrist and hit peak popularity almost overnight. They were simple, a metal strip wrapped in colorful fabric that snapped around your arm with one satisfying motion. One moment it was straight, the next it curled tight, clinging like a coiled snake. Every kid had one, some had dozens. They came in neon colors, animal prints, sparkles. Beaded curtains walk through one, and you were instantly transported into another world. Beaded door curtains weren't just home decor, they were portals. The soft clatter of beads colliding became a soundtrack all its own, and you could never sneak through them no matter how hard you tried. They were beautiful, cheap, colorful, exotic in a way that felt grown up. You bought them at head shops or flea markets. Which one shocked or cracked you up most? The 1970s were a different time, a time of wild freedom, questionable safety standards, and things that seemed perfectly normal then but would cause absolute panic today. These memories remind us how much we've changed, for better and worse, and maybe make us a little nostalgic for that reckless innocence we can never quite get back.